The first thing was behavioral economics, but I wanted to go through it with a particular context, not just in any random order. Because if you think about it, it's just going to be a 15 marker, 9 marker, or a 25 marker. And the only things that you really need to know is to apply it to as an explanation of irrational behavior and in terms of policies as alternatives to traditional government intervention. So if we start here, do you know the main reasons why humans are irrational in terms of the behavioral economic side of it?
So is this like the bounded rationality and
Yeah,
like bounded self-control?
yeah. So, so irrational is bounded rationality. So that's the first key word we can use. So we can say there's bounded rationality. That just means limited rationality. But then underneath that, we've got a bunch of explanations as to in what ways people have bounded rationality. Okay. So one reason is bounded self-control. When you're doing behavioral economics more than other topics, um, examples are your best friend. So just always give as many examples and realistic and nice, simple examples as you can. So for example, you've got a shiny can of Fanta and a boring bottle of water. And then because of bounded self-control, it's going to be difficult to pick the water, even though you told yourself you might get the water before. Another one is herd behavior and also social norms. So I'll put those both together. And by the way, for any of these, if you don't remember the keyword, that's completely fine. Just explain it. The keyword just does help a little. Both of these are pretty self-explanatory. It's when people make an irrational decision purely on the basis that they see other people doing it or they are already used to it. And you can link it to being to something being habitual, like the way you travel, such as if you drive every time, it's just a habit. And then you can link any of these things to inelasticity or high demand and so on. A few fancy ones. So we've got heuristics. Heuristics is just a fancy word for mental shortcuts. So what that means is um, humans will make really fast decisions because um, and they won't sit down and weigh everything up and make the necessarily most accurate decision. The reason for this is purely just to save time. Okay. And there's different ways they do this. For example, um, they and the other ones link together. So now, because they don't want to research which is the uh best school to go to, they'll just go to the nearest school, or they'll just go to the school that their friends went to, or they'll just go to the school that they know other people go to, like that kind of thing. Um, on top of that, we have so humans make quick decisions. For example, you could before you go on a journey, you could check maps and see the traffic in your nearby area, and that might save you 5 minutes. But instead, you might just take a shortcut and just go in your car and just go the way you've always gone. Um, and that relates to a few different things like anchoring, availability bias, and then one more. So anchoring is just relying on the first piece of information that you have available. And availability bias is when you um, choose to do something because of a memorable event. So, for example, if you're with your friend and your friend says that they like going somewhere by car because it's more fun, so you're automatically going to make the decision to go to travel somewhere by car because of that. So basing something on something memorable rather than the research and the pros and cons. The last one is computational weakness. It's not on the spec, and it's just the idea that humans let's say humans can make a rational decision, but they won't because they don't have the information available. Secondly, even if they do have the information available, the information might be inaccurate, or even then, they might just read it wrong, or they might not know what the information means, or it takes far too much time to read all the information and weigh up the pros and cons. So these are just some of the keywords you can use in your paragraph. But really, you just need to say that humans have bounded rationality, whilst traditional economics assumes that everybody is 100% rational and maximizes utility. And then all you have to do is pick one or two or three of these things and talk about them in detail and just give loads of examples. That's all you can do because there's not much chain of reasoning in this topic. Uh, The way you would apply this in terms of a government intervention question is you would start your chain of reasoning by explaining that because of the risk of government failure, there are alternatives due to modern studies of behavioral economics, and those are behavioral alternative policies. So, literally, it could be something as simple as like if I want to increase cycling on the roads, then what I would do is have really nice cycle lanes, like scenic cycle lanes, or just make cycle lanes really nice and comfortable to ride in. And all of a sudden, you're more nudged to cycling. Um, or if I want to stop people driving, then I would put a lot of bumps and roadworks on the road and make driving unpleasant. Or if I want to get people to go to the gym, I might I might imagine like a school bus and it has a stop where every school bus has a stop saying the gym, and then that would automatically just get more people going to the gym without forcing them, without changing the market for the gym. So all you have to do is apply it with common sense and be a bit creative. But then when you're applying it, you could use these keywords. So the best word to start with is nudge. These are all nudge policies that I talked about. And that's as opposed to shove policies. But shove is just traditional government intervention. And if you're comparing, you can talk about the risk of government failure. Um, and then there's just three more things, but I wouldn't really talk about them that much, but it can be appropriate sometimes. So you've got choice architecture, you've got framing, and you've got choice. So for choice, you've got default choice, restricted choice, and mandated choice. And I think mandated is when you're forced to choose something or forced to not choose something. Restricted is when you're given three or four options and you have to pick one of those. And that's really helpful because if I said pick a number between 1 and 100, you'd start thinking about different things and thinking like about all the numbers and weighing it up. But if I said pick a number 1 or 2, it'll be easy for you to just pick one. And that's even better in real life. So if I said, how do you want to travel to Oxford Street? Or compared to if I said, shall we drive or take the tube? That's an easier question. So that's what restricted choice is. And it relates to that thing I was talking about, computational weakness. If you provide somebody a really big list of options, like a restaurant menu, then people will spend ages trying to decide what to get. But if I said, do you want a burger or do you want pizza? It would be easy to pick. So it speeds up decision making and actually makes it more accurate just because of the limited choice. And default is when you're ticked and you have to opt out of it. So that's even extra effort. So you could use that to nudge more people to do something because they have to opt out otherwise. What's an example of that? Like in real life, if you go to a restaurant, um, you basically assume that you're assumed to not have any allergies But if you have allergies, you put your hand up and say that, like to the waiter that you have allergies. So that would be like a default assumption. But this is more in the case of like questions and surveys. Lastly, you've got framing and choice architecture. Framing is the way you frame the question to somebody. So if I asked you what grade you think you would get, or if I asked you, do you think you would get an A? Because I'm asking a yes or no question, um, it changes the answer, like the probabilities of the different answers. And then lastly, choice architecture is when you move things around to influence people's choices. Like for example, and most of these nudge policies, you can just sum it up really simply with choice architecture. For example, in a shop, you might have Red Bull all the way at the back, or lottery tickets behind the counter, and you have to ask somebody physically for it. But um, the salad would be at the front, and it would be like really open, and anybody could grab what they want. So that's an example of choice architecture, and it just influences or nudges people to make different decisions to normal.